Hello and welcome to the debate right here at Press TV. I'm Marzi Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, another Bahraini man is dead after falling victim to tear gas, which has been fired by regime forces. Abdulaziz Al Said has apparently died from suffocation due to the toxic tear gas he inhaled as regime forces attacked residential areas. Now, this comes as Bahrain has been the scene of daily protests against the detention of Sheikh Ali Salman. Now, Al Said has become a statistic of the growing number of Bahrainis who have been killed, injured, or imprisoned during their quest for equality in their own country.
Anti-government protests continue in Bahrain. Thousands of people have turned a funeral for a man killed by regime forces into a demonstration against the Al Khalifa dynasty. Abdul Aziz Al Said died in the town of Bilad Al Qadim after inhaling tear gas on Saturday during a protest against the continued detention of Sheikh Ali Salman, the leader of the main opposition group Al Wafaq. Bahrainis have been holding daily protests demanding the release of Salman since his arrest in late December. Bahraini authorities have charged the leader of the country's largest opposition bloc with trying to topple the regime.
The UN have spoke out about Sheikh Ali Salman and other human rights organizations like Amnesty. They released a report demanding his immediate release, and they say that he is a prisoner of conscience. As long as many MPs also they have called for his release, because it's clear for everybody that this leader, who is a peaceful leader calling for struggling for democracy in Bahrain, and that charges against him is not acceptable, and no one will believe that Sheikh Ali Salman is calling for violence. It's clear that it's a propaganda from the government to silence and suppress all these activists.
The Al Wafaq National Islamic Society says 83 parliamentarians from around the world have supported a joint appeal calling for the immediate release of the detained opposition leader. The appeal also calls on the government to drop charges against Sheikh Salman. The signatories have urged their governments to demand that Manama comply with its obligations under international human rights laws. Bahrain has defied calls to show tolerance toward dissent. All such calls have been made by international rights groups and non-Western governments. Western states have kept largely silent on the situation in Bahrain. Britain, as an ally of the Al Khalifa dynasty, has recently reiterated its support for the Bahraini government. The US, Manama's other ally, has ignored the opposition's calls to pressure the Bahraini regime over its repressive tactics to silence dissidents.
Arms sales continue to Bahrain. The British have announced they're building a naval base in Bahrain. Of course, we know that the United States fleet is based in Bahrain. There's also massive investment, and the arms sale issue, I think, is an issue people here should be concentrating on, demanding a complete cessation of all arms sales to Bahrain, because, as we know, as you say, the gas has been used to kill people.
The crackdown in Bahrain has left many people dead. Thousands of others have been arrested, and many of them sentenced to long jail terms.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program out of New York-based reporter, Ms. Maxine Dover, and out of London from Bahrain Freedom Movement, Dr. Saeed Shahabi. Thank you both for being with us. Well, let's start this off in New York. And Ms. Dover, since the detention of Sheikh Salman, protests have increased as the voices are getting louder to release Sheikh Salman. Don't you think that it's odd that the regime would not have known by arresting a leading opposition figure, basically, they're going to give fuel to the fire of their movement?
Well, I have to agree with you there. The call by Liz Stossel, the UN High Commissioner, adds to that fuel and that likelihood of fire. And yes, I would think the regime would have been a bit more subtle in its attempt to control.
What about it, Dr. Shahabi, your perspective? We've seen another Bahraini man being killed, and thousands, of course, have turned out for his funeral. What type of rippling effect does this have? Again, we see the protesters going out and, of course, protesting against incarcerations and their overall situation. Then another protester is killed, and then thousands again turn out for his funeral. Tell me about the overall effect of it all on the movement.
Thank you very much. First of all, the arrest of Sheikh Ali Salman was not surprising to Bahrainis who have expected that almost every Bahraini is a suspect in his or her own land. Every Bahraini is a non-Bahraini in Bahrain. I am a Bahraini father and grandfather for hundreds of years. Today they say I am not a Bahraini. They revoked my nationality. Now, with the detention of Sheikh Ali Salman, the fury among the people has become too much because they believe that the situation has deteriorated to the extent that life and death became equal to them. Whether they die or remain is the same under this dictatorship. So what we saw today, when thousands of people poured into the streets to mourn one more martyr, Abdulaziz al-Said, show that the situation is becoming out of control for the regime and its allies. Of course, it is astonishing that until today, neither the United States nor Britain have come clean in their stand or have really said something that is in conformity with what they have always preached, that they want to preach pro-democracy and respect of human rights. The situation in Bahrain is going to escalate. There will be more tension. And of course, with the hopefully demise of the Saudi authority and strength, hopefully the Arab world will become better in a few years' time, because these evil regimes will disappear soon, inshallah.
What about that, Ms. Dover? When we look at the start of the almost daily demonstrations, if we go back to 2011 and compare it to today, the intensity is definitely still there, and some would say even increasing now. So what is the key? If we look at the difference between the demonstrators in 2011 and their demands, and we compare it now to today, as our guest in London has said, that for a lot of them now, there's no distinction between life and death because of the horrible conditions that they're being subjected to.
Well, this is a terribly sad status, and certainly not one that any person who adores freedom and who cares about civilization could be anything except very, very sad to hear. The representation of Sheikh Ali Saddam is in jail is a very negative statement about the position of free politics and the attempt to freedom in Bahrain. It's a very difficult position for the United States because of the status as ally and because of the interest in maintaining
So let me just jump in here. What does that mean, Ms. Dover? You said it's a very difficult position for the United States.
On the other hand, but on the same hand,
I'm sorry, if you can hear me, you said it was a very difficult position for the United States because of this being an ally and because of the strategic aspect over it. So does it mean, one second please, does it mean then strategic interest comes over people's lives for Washington?
Not at all. Not at all. It means that a peaceful approach to having democracy and having freedom for the people should be what is sought by all. Certainly, revolution and death in the street is not what anyone would want. On the contrary, the use of the parliamentary voting mechanism is what should be able to change the position of the people so that life is treasured and death is not the common point, but rather that freedom and life and the American way, as well as the way of freedom anywhere, should be what is the end result.
Okay. Dr. Shahabi, your take. If we look at Sheikh Ali Salman, we see that whenever he spoke, he talked about actually peaceful demonstration, definitely standing for nonviolence. And if an individual like this is being incarcerated and not allowed to be free, then what kind of message is that sending in general? Ms. Dover said that the United States would like a democratic process to be in place in Bahrain. I'd like your perspective also on her comment.
First of all, Sheikh Ali Salman has always called for peaceful protests. Secondly, he had been a member of parliament for 5 years. Thirdly, he had commanded the largest bloc ever in the so-called parliament, which of course I myself did not believe it was a parliament. I think it was a show place for the regime. Fourthly, the others who had been arrested before him, the Bahrain 13, who include Hassan Mushema, Abdul Wahab Hussein, Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja, and others, they were all calling for peaceful protests. Nothing is recorded or registered against them otherwise. Nothing is violent in their behavior or in their calls. Nabil Rajab may be sentenced in 2 days' time on the 20th. On charges of ridiculous charges that he called for hatred of the regime, or he abused some sectors, some departments of the government. And then this international human rights activist may find himself behind bars for another 5-6 years just because he criticized the Justice Ministry or whatever. I mean, we are living under a regime which is one of the most repressive, reactionary, backward, antiquated regime in the world. Until when can the United States tolerate a regime that is ruled by a clan, by a tribe? I don't know, where does the United States get its impression, or the UK for that purpose, that this regime is either reforming itself or can be reformed without giving power back to the people to choose their own government and their own system. So I think Sheikh Ali Salman's arrest and the message behind it is that we do not care. Why? Because Washington and London are supporting us, and Riyadh is sending its troops to us. Let me just say this final comment here. This regime is now, at this moment of time, supported militarily by 6 countries. We have the Saudi forces, we have the United Arab Emirates forces, we have Jordanian forces, we have Pakistani forces, 30,000 of them, and then we have the US Fifth Fleet base in Bahrain, and now they are building the British naval base. Now, a regime that needs 6 big countries to support it, does it work? Is it worth supporting? Okay. It means that the minute you get away, it will fall on its own. So it is a useless, hopeless regime that must go.
What about that, Mr. Dover? Our guest in London said that it is an extremely repressive and reactionary regime, clan-ruled, and we see this type of support coming from the United States, not only for Bahrain, but for other countries like Saudi Arabia, also very repressive regime. Is it not that Washington then gives off mixed signals? On the one hand, it says it stands for democracy and the right for people to take their future in their own hands in their countries, and yet basically supporting these type of repressive regimes.
You know, as I said, it's a very difficult position to seek democracy is the way that would be preferable, I think, for all. For Sheikh Ali Saddam to be jailed for his approach, his attempt at peaceful change is a scandal. The regime has thrown out an American who brought action. Tom Alensky, the Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights, was removed by the regime, if I might just. He was ordered to leave Bahrain. The expulsion is said to have strained relations. So this is not such a cut and dried standing before a regime that is oppressive. And certainly Liz Sambal, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, has called for the release of Sheikh Ali Saddam as well.
What about that, Dr. Shahabi? Do you think that relations
all
between
of these
Washington...
things stand to...
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Dover. You want to finish your sentence? Go ahead. There's a delay.
No, it's all right. I was just to say that all of these things indicate that there is significant change in the air, and that there needs to be a much wider political presence for the opposition.
Dr. Shahabi, I was asking, do you agree that the relations between Manama and Washington, the relations are strained right now?
Well, I do not know, because it seems to me that when Tom Malinowski was removed, as my colleague just said, I thought Washington would have taken a stronger stand. They sent him back again, but we did not know what he told the Bahrainis and what the Bahrainis told him. Now, three and a half years ago, I was heartened when I heard Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State, saying that the United States had long considered security as of paramount, and it compromised democracy for the sake of security. She said that now we realize that neither had been achieved. We didn't have security and we didn't have democracy. So now, after the Arab Spring, the United States has decided or should adopt the policy of securing democracy, defending democracy, and democracy would eventually lead to stability. I think she was right in saying that. Unfortunately, the successive stance and policies do not conform to what she said. The United States now simply is silent about what one of its important allies, of special allies, they call it special ally or special friendship with Bahrain. It's doing everything possible to delegitimize any support, any Western support to the regime. Yet Washington is not doing what it should do. It's not voicing its condemnation of the arrest of Sheikh Ali Salman or the 3,500 prisoners, most of whom, the vast majority of whom, have been detained simply because they had expressed their opinion freely. Freedom of expression does not exist. Okay. Freedom of assembly does not exist in Bahrain today.
What about that? Let me turn to New York. What about that, Ms. Dover? It appears that there are many mixed signals given in this region by the United States and its allies. We've seen time and time again when it's a situation that appears to be perhaps in Washington interest, they may support the people. When it appears from Washington's perspective that it may not be in their interest, then mum is the word as far as democratic movements. We look at Bahrain, for example. We can look at what happened, the complex situation that happened in Egypt and so many places. On the one hand, when the people, or Ukraine, for example, for that matter, if it appears to be in their interest, then they will get out and say it's a people's movement and we must stand for democracy. And if Washington takes a perspective that they're not going to support these people, it appears that it doesn't matter how many are killed, how many are injured, and how many are imprisoned. But basically, they're looking in the another direction, like what is happening regarding Bahrain.
Well, I don't think that's quite a fair statement. I think that the timing of this crisis, in conjunction with so many other crises in the world at the moment, is terrible for the people of Bahrain. I think the the facts of what is going on the ground in Europe, in the Ukraine, as you mentioned. In France this week, at the point of a new Congress finding its way in the United States, is a terrible timing with regard to the ability of the United States to respond as quickly as perhaps it should to the arrest and incarceration of Sheikh Ali Saddam. It's not an excuse, but it is one of multiple facts that is part of this whole equation.
All right, we're just about out of time. 30 seconds, Dr. Shahabi. 30 seconds, sir, to answer. Is this? I'm sorry, Ms. Dover. 30 seconds, Dr. Shahabi. Your take on what is happening. Is it just that so many other things are happening in the world, and perhaps London and Washington cannot get to the situation of what's on the ground in Bahrain, or is there something else behind it all?
I believe that both Washington and London are missing the point. The point is that if you support dictators, you get Al-Qaeda and you get the Islamic State or the Daesh, this IS or ISIS. If you do not support the transformation into democracy, we will end up with more extremism, more terrorism, and the West eventually will pay the price because of its lack of vision to support and to promote democracy in the Middle East, and to support the people in determining their own fate and remove and allow the removal of this dictatorship from the Middle East.
All right, so sorry to interrupt you, but we're out of time. I appreciate both of you being with us. Maxine Dover, New York-based reporter, and out of London, Dr. Saeed Shahabi, Bahrain Freedom Movement. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you tuning in to us right here on The Debate. Make sure you join us same place tomorrow for another debate. I'm Marzieh Hashemi, signing out. Goodbye.